Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound.
Hey Mark, can you hear us okay? Yep, we're going on to public session now, Mark.
Actually live now.
Okay, thank you Clerk and Moji and my members to Fáilte Roh Lig. We do have quorum and I now call the meeting to order and welcome each of you to the 76th meeting of the Committee for Communities. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices can however be used through a Wi-Fi connection and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to Assembly's Wi-Fi network and no recordings or photographs are to be taken. May I remind members also about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices. Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly and in a way which does not interfere with proceedings and be aware of the cameras and sensitivity of the microphones throughout the course of the meeting. And could I ask members on Zoom to be mindful of background images. Agenda item 1, members, is declaration of interest and remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. Do members have any items of interest they wish to declare? No? Members okay, thank you. Okay, members, apologies. Are members aware of any apologies? Clerk? No. Okay, members, then moving on to Chair's business then. I'd just like to remind members of the joint informal meeting with the Finance Committee on digital infrastructure and cyber security risks across the community and voluntary sector due to take place on Tuesday 10th of March from 12:30 to 2 p.m. in room 29, and I would appreciate members' attendance if possible. Further information in relation to this item can be found in correspondence item 11.7 on page 438 of your meeting pack. Also, members, I noted the announcement in relation to £9 million grassroots football facilities programme announced in media and via WMS yesterday. I propose, members, that we seek a briefing from officials in relation to this programme. Members content? Thank you. Agenda item 4, members, draft minutes from the meeting on 26th of February, and they're contained at page 7. Do members have any edits or amendments to the draft minutes? No, thank you. Are members then content, therefore, to agree the minutes of 26th of February as drafted? Content, members? Thank you. Agenda item 5, members, is an SL1. It's the Pension Protection Fund and Occupational Pension Schemes Levy Ceiling Order NI 2026. This SL1 was received on the 18th of February and the relevant papers can be found in the meeting pack at page 20. Members will recall that the Minister requested a shortened time frame for this rule and that we received a briefing from the Department last week in relation to this SL1 and agreed to take a number of actions which were to publish the Department's papers, issue a call for evidence with a closing date of 11th of March, reconsider the SL1 today, together with any responses from the call for evidence. So, do members have any comments, or are you content, members, for the Department to make the rule? Members content. Thank you. Agenda item 6, members, is SL1 Social Security and Statutory Maternity Pay Evidence of Pregnancy Amendment Regulations 2026. This SL1 was received on the 18th of February and the relevant papers can be found in our meeting pack at page 37. Members will recall that the Minister requested a shortened timeframe for this rule and that we received a briefing from the Department last week in relation to this SL1 and agreed to publish the Department's papers, issue a call for evidence with a closing date of 11th of March and reconsider the SL1 today together with any responses from the call for evidence. You will also note that we did not have a draft SREM for this SL1 last week. However, we have now received this EM and it does have an impact on our table paper ordering, which I'll come to later, and just direct members towards the later table papers that were issued at 7:52. So do members have any comment or are they content for the Department to proceed to make the rule? Content. Thank you, members. Okay, members, then moving on to today's briefings. So, members, as you're aware, we have all 11 councils represented here today. Pause now or do the intro?
I think it might be better to do it when the officers are in place, Chair.
Okay, so in order to get everyone in place, we're going to take a short pause to get people into place.
Okay.
Thank you, Clerk.
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber.
She confirmed live.
Thank you. Okay, members, so we're resuming then in live with broadcasting resumed, and we're moving on to today's briefings, which are, as you're aware, members, we have all 11 councils represented here today, and we've planned to hear directly from them in 3 sets of panels discussing each council's position and approach to anti-poverty efforts here. By way of reminder for the council officers here today, we as a committee have had a particular interest in and focus on the anti-poverty strategy since the committee was established. In pursuing this interest through our statutory scrutiny role, it became clear to members that local councils do a significant amount of work and in this area. And last spring, just a second. Oh yeah. So last spring, summer, the committee agreed to hold a focus meeting with all councils to hear about all of your roles in relation to the implementation of the draft strategy. I'm sure you'll all agree that this is a significant approach and a significant strategy that requires a cohesive partnership approach. I think committee have been very conscious that the ability of councils to act as a very important partner in relation to this is something that we've been very, very keen on. Therefore, I'd like to thank all council officers for their attendance here today and for corresponding with us since last May and for the submission of additional information for members in advance of today's meeting. We note that some of you have travelled some considerable distance, and this has taken time out of what I'm sure are busy working days for all of you, and we're really glad to have this session with you all. Councils are a frequent issue that arise in this, and none more so importantly than in terms of the anti-poverty session. So we're now moving to our first panel, and that's agenda item 7, Local Councils and the Anti-Poverty Strategy, Oral Evidence, Panel 1. The papers, members, for this agenda item is at pages 52 to pages 106 of the meeting pack and pages 4 to 31 of your tabled papers. Can I now welcome the following officials to the meeting? Ronan McKenna, and Ronan's Director of Community and Culture in Antrim and Newtownabbey Borough Council. Patricia Mackey, Community Planning and Climate Manager, Ards and North Down Borough Council. Kevin Heaney, who is Head of Inclusive Growth and Anti-Poverty in Belfast City Council, and David Burns, who is Chief Executive of Lisburn and Castlereagh City Council. So I'm going to invite each of you in turn to make a brief opening statement before we move to questions from members. So I'm proposing that we will go to Ronan first, then Patricia, then Kevin, and then David. So, Lana Eilish, obviously conscious of time and conscious there could be a good bit of overlap, so we'll try and work our way through it as succinctly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks members for the opportunity to present to you this morning regarding the anti-poverty strategy. Based on the correspondence we received from the committee clerks on the 18th of February, we've furnished the committee with a written response based on the 3 areas: the consultation feedback, local interventions that we've been leading in Antrim and Newtownabbey, and the integration piece as well. I'll just give a quick brief overview, not get into the detail because members have already been furnished with that. Firstly, we welcome the statutory commitment to publish an anti-poverty strategy under Section 28E of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. On the anti-poverty strategy, the draft promotes a whole government approach, which is obviously welcome, and likened to community planning, where we've had some success with since the establishment of RPA and refined local government. We welcome this in principle, but it's a practical integration that probably needs further clarity in our view to develop, as poverty is multidimensional. The strategy needs to go further in defining council's role. You've already outlined, Chair, the importance of the councils can play, and that was demonstrated throughout the COVID pandemic, on our flexibility and agile and working with the community and voluntary sector to be responsive in terms of dealing with that, and identifying formal mechanisms that we can link in with the executive to define then local structures. Also, the reference around pool budget or joint commission is laid in the strategy, and we would encourage the executive and the assembly to look further at looking at financial and budget alignment to this. And while the whole government approach is evident, We feel that the strategy cannot be achieved without budget alignment and policy coherence. We would also encourage that it's enhanced through smart targets, measurable indicators and a full and costed delivery plan. We believe the focus of that should be around skills gaps for local residents, unemployment, low wages, housing pressures, increasing food and fuel insecurity, and dealing with people with lived experience of these, making sure that they're involved in the co-design of the strategy, and making sure that there's governance mechanisms around participation for that as well. In terms of the anti-poverty strategy, we welcome that it's a cross-departmental policy alignment aligned to community planning, and we would encourage that around smart targets, pool budgets and clear local delivery frameworks that enable councils and community and voluntary sector to integrate and deliver on behalf of their local residents. We would encourage that specific role for councils to be clearly identified and define the partnership structures. Examples that might include the labour market partnerships where we've had successful, funded through the DFC that members will be familiar with as well, and how we can build on that successes, because that's been a good conduit where money is filtered from central government into local councils, and then we've been able to engage at local ground with local businesses, community and voluntary sector, etc., to increase employability and training and skills and address some of them gaps. So from our point of view, in conclusion of the strategy for the first part, it requires operational design. That would be more detail in terms of that, and the cross-departmental ambition needs to go further in terms of establishing resource and accountability and local integration mechanisms. We in Antrim and Newtownabbey Borough Council feel that we're ready and positioned. We've developed our own strategy in relation to anti-poverty, and we believe that we're well positioned to support the Executive and the Northern Ireland Assembly in capable of delivering sustainable poverty solutions and reducing poverty. Just in terms of light touch, in terms of local interventions, again, we've furnished you within our packs, but some of the successes, and I'm sure some of my council colleagues will touch on these as well. We've had successes through the likes of the Social Supermarket Initiative being delivered at local level. We've also encouraged and worked with the community and voluntary sector to develop stuff like school uniform recycling schemes at local level. Community fridges have been rolled out, and even Christmas toy recycling schemes. So they're just practical measures that we've had successes at local level in Antrim and Newtownabbey. But again, building on the more strategic content around the labour market partnerships and how we can go further. Again, we've had some successes where we've had over 125 participants in our labour market partnership academies, through academies and skills, and then leading to employment, series of job fairs, etc. as well. And I think it would be important for me to mention our community advice partners on the ground. Again, each of the councils will be involved with different contracts. We work very closely with community advice Antrim and Newtownabbey to deliver a range of anti-poverty measures, and they're experts in terms of benefit advice, debt management plan, crisis intervention, etc., etc. So working with them to make sure that there's financial planning and security in the long term. It's well versed where the community and voluntary sector is currently sitting at the minute, and I think that cognizant and realisation of that, and again picking up on the COVID and going back to the successes that we had at that period in building and strengthening the resilience of our community and voluntary sector would be critical as well. Just in closing, Chair, then the integration from our perspective in Antrim and Newtownabbey needs to focus on that economic participation, the health and well-being, social inclusion and access to essential services, which would always obviously be linked to advice services as well. We want to see that integration with our labour market partnership, where we think we're starting to get successes, but the journey in anti-poverty and addressing that won't be an overnight fix. It'll be a long-term strategic solution. Also alignment with housing supply and infrastructure, childcare strategy, which I know the Executive and the Assembly are pushing forward as well, and skills strategies. We want to work in multi-agency, similar to what we've built under community planning with a range of networks. We can't do this alone, and we need the support of wider statutory agencies as well. So effective partnership planning, workforce stability aligned to funding, long-term impact measurement and associated funding will be the key to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ronan. Patricia?
Thanks, Chair and members, for inviting me along today to speak about anti-poverty and to give Ards and North Down Borough Council's position on this. In Ards and North Down, our community planning partnership has made reducing poverty and inequality a priority. The Council has done similar within our own corporate plan. Despite our borough's reputation for affluence, the evidence is telling us a very, very different story. Poverty is rising. We used to be one of the least affected areas, but recent data on both relative and absolute poverty actually now places us above the Northern Ireland average and mid-table in relation to other council areas. More households are struggling with food insecurity, high housing and energy costs, unaffordable childcare and growing personal debt. And many of those affected actually fall just above entitlement thresholds, which means that hardship is often hidden. Both urgent short-term support and long-term structural solutions are required for this. The complication is that although councils have a clear role in tackling poverty, I would say we don't really have clarity around the specifics of what that role actually is. Anti-poverty, it's not one of our statutory functions. And while health, education and housing partners all absolutely contribute to the solutions, tackling poverty isn't actually their core function either. And as a result of this, what we find is that there's no real natural local lead, even though joined up local action is absolutely essential. And in Ards and North Down, this gap means that council, we have tried to step forward to try and coordinate our own community planning partnership. But I suppose without real clear expectations, authority, resources, or even a shared framework that aligns this local responsibility with what the regional one actually is. And this creates real risks, fragmented activity, duplication across partners, and I suppose too much focus on really treating the symptoms instead of actually really trying to address the underlying causes of poverty. One of the big questions for me around the whole anti-poverty strategy is how is it going to give councils and our community planning partners and our other local partners the clarity that we need really on what our respective roles are to make sure that local action becomes coherent, that it's coordinated and that it's genuinely about the whole system rather than just a continuation of really good but possibly unconnected programmes. In Ards and North Down Borough Council, we are trying to identify what our own anti-poverty levers are across all of our different service areas, so from procurement to climate action, community development, regeneration, employability, etc. Because I want to be able to show our community planning partners and also my colleagues where we have influence and the type of influence that we have. My written submission does mention some of this work activity along with some of the other things that Ronan had mentioned around the labour market partnership and the social supermarkets, which are all really, really important interventions. I think for the work that we're trying to do through community planning and internally within the council, what we really need is a strategy that sets clear expectations for councils and our community planning partnerships. We can only facilitate effectively when our authority, responsibilities and resources are clearly defined as part of this whole of government approach. We need to try and identify who is best placed to lead and coordinate anti-poverty work locally. If leadership is left unspecified, councils, we do tend to inherit these things by default. Our influence is possibly the smallest out of all of our various partners, but we do lead the facilitation of community planning partners, which I think is where we really have the opportunity to step up. But if it's undefined, then this is going to create an inconsistent approach across Northern Ireland. We need a strategy that is going to support all partners to understand their contribution, through shared data and common indicators. And I think this includes mechanisms that ensures lived experience and community perspectives shape the design and delivery of the support that's actually needed, because without this we're not going to be able to deliver effective prevention or the long-term pathways out of poverty that we really, really need. If the strategy is able to provide this clarity around coordination and leadership, councils and partners across Northern Ireland, I think, will be able to work much more effectively together. There'll be clear integration between regional strategy and local delivery, stronger support for the proven local interventions, and a coherent framework that prevents duplication and ensures that resources are actually targeted where they're going to have the greatest impact. This is the opportunity that the strategy has, and I think it's why getting this right matters so much. So thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for inviting me today to the session. And as you did mention, some of my points I'm going to raise do connect with my local government colleagues. We have shared with the committee the formal response that the Council had submitted to the draft anti-poverty strategy. But as said previously, as part of the Council's recent refresh of its community plan, the Belfast Agenda, a key and immediate area of concern emerging from the stakeholder group, the engagement with voluntary representation, citizens, communities of interest, elected members, was the growing poverty crisis which was impacting on the city. No longer was poverty a thing. It's now a norm across many sectors, and the big issue around in-work and poverty has become really important. One of the big areas I would commend to the department, to the committee, is the importance of data and evidence. This is very important in tackling poverty. It helps us understand where the pressures are greatest, who is most affected, and how poverty is changing over time. But data alone is not enough. It's how you use that data to focus activity and focus priorities. I would commend to the committee a recent research report from Joseph Rowntree Foundation on December this year, which gives some really startling facts. 110,000 children in Northern Ireland live in poverty. 29.6% of children in Belfast live in poverty. But it also draws out that not only at a city, at a macro level, there is significant concentration in poverty. For instance, in Belfast West, there's 33% of all children living in poverty. Some of the startling facts that it draws out that 6 in 10 children in poverty live in households where one or more of the adults are in work. So it's just the diversification of poverty. It's is something to be aware of. In terms of the Council's response and input into the draft strategy, in responding, the Council did, in principle, support the vision, the ambition, and the broad aims of the strategy, but it did have concerns, however, in relation to the absence of any detail in terms of specific actions, timescales, and SMART targets. Some of the more specific points that the Council had raised in response was, we did think that there was an absence of potentially a fourth pillar that focused on prevention, calling out explicitly in the strategy as a strategic direction of travel, so it's prevention of poverty. The need to develop and embed measurable targets, i.e. reducing child poverty, so it's something that can be tangible, that we can test and measure all our successes against. The need, as we said previously, for clear accountability across the system, not only across central government departments, but also the role of local government and other stakeholders within that whole ecosystem of support. We did feel that the proposal that was put forward by the Anti-Poverty Network around an independent Poverty and Equality Commission would be beneficial, because ultimately it would hold us all to account as a collective system and how we help alleviating poverty. But we did also highlight that there is a lot of great activity, some examples already highlighted before, place-based interventions. So it's recognising what works well already on the ground and enhancing and sustaining. Big issues is the sustainability of funding, and one of the other things we were saying, multi-year funding to establish impactful programmes will start to make a difference. In terms of some of the local interventions, again in our response we drew out some practical examples of what we did, but I'll give a quick summary. Since 2022, the Council, working initially for the first 2 years with the Department, delivered a hardship programme. It was in excess of an annual hardship programme of about 1 million plus. Its focus was multiple-fold. It sought to bring forward an intervention support for children and young people. It looked at supporting individuals and families in their emergency need, and importantly focused on supporting elderly people and people finding themselves in isolation. We did, as I said earlier, we didn't create new things. We worked with core delivery and support agencies on the ground, and we enhanced our ability to do more. So we added additionality, and that was for the first time for the Council, even Belfast City Council. We work with our schools network within the city. Last year, for instance, we gave $250,000 through to all schools of every age, nursery right through to grammar to special needs schools, to enable them to do additional stuff such as breakfast clubs, hot school meals, uniforms. So that was the first, like we were going beyond our statutory remit, but our members thought it was the best way to address poverty is our youth and our children and young people. We enhanced another good thing referred to earlier, and again co-funded with DFC, is the social supermarkets. We think that is a real viable and beneficial and impactful model, because not only does it provide access to immediate need, it also gives people pathways out of poverty, because there is that wraparound support that enables them to enter employment opportunities, training opportunities. So we would really advocate this, the retention and the scalability, upscaling of that service. Some of the other local examples was the advice services. We put a lot of money with DFC, £2 million last year, into our advice services and helping to diversify, taking them on board the data and what types of advice people needed. Again, pathways out of employment, employability and skills, some of the local initiatives that we're doing with that. And a practical but impactful initiative that the Council has implemented over the last 3 years was a cost of living guidebook. Basically what this is people don't know what they don't know, and putting a list of the types of services and references points and support agencies in the document that people could just take away and themselves has been really impactful. And last year alone, I think it was 55,000 of these either downloaded or taken away over the period of the year. So something really simple and practical on the ground. In terms of the integration and the working together, similar to before, we feel that no organisation, sector or government department can tackle poverty on their own. It's all about integration and collaboration. We do feel that community planning provides a real possible platform to support greater integration, avoid duplication and importantly, maximise collective resource efficiency and collective energy. The Council again has recently brought together a citywide and cross-sectoral anti-poverty network, which brings together service providers, lived experience, community partners and other agencies to understand what types of support does exist and understanding the referral pathways within the city. So when one individual would go to same community seeking certain advice, they know if it's not the advice they can provide, who to pass it on to. So our members has agreed that we will continue to support this and that will be our sort of helping us shape our interventions and focus around poverty going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin and David. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Thanks for the opportunity to attend the committee today to discuss addressing poverty in Northern Ireland. Lisburn, Castlereagh and councils more generally have strong partnership arrangements in place with DFC as a sponsored department for the anti-poverty strategy. DFC colleagues provided our council and local organisations with the opportunity to contribute to the strategy development during the consultation phase. We did ask that councils and community organisations be involved from the outset in development of future strategies. Our focus as a council has been in delivering better services to our residents, businesses and visitors. We take great pride in delivering high quality services to our residents. As the most localised form of government, I would argue that our officers and councillors are best placed to understand what communities need and want. As such, our council has developed several initiatives that impact both directly and indirectly on poverty. Although Lisburn Castlereagh is generally seen as an affluent area, 13% of the population live in poverty, many of whom are in employment. Some of our initiatives are aimed at community-wide level, predominantly through grant funding, aimed at building capacity, increasing resilience and general well-being. Programmes we develop recognise the hardship that can be faced more prominently at particular times in the year. Our fantastic and free Christmas Light Festival attracted 166,000 people this year. We deliver a range of free city centre activities such as walking tours from our museum and free play opportunities for kids, whilst we offer a number of free summer programmes delivered through local sports groups and community groups. With funding support from DFC and DFE, we deliver and support initiatives for those seeking employment or benefits advice. Furthermore, we support our local food banks and social supermarket projects. Like all councils, we're very aware of the financial challenges facing the executive over the coming period. There's a need to do more with less, therefore. I believe more efficient and effective service could be delivered through joined-up funding across executive departments to community planning partnerships, with relevant work being commissioned through councils. This would provide greater administrative efficiencies through monitoring and reporting, while services would be truly joined up and targeted through community planning partnerships. Through an improved and more focused programme for government, community planning partnerships could make real and lasting impact at a local level to meet meaningful national objectives. To achieve this, momentum is required to streamline processes, map executive funding, and to consider key targets against which the executive wishes to measure itself against. As a comparator, Scottish outcome-focused systems aim to ensure community planning partnerships and councils deliver effectively against national outcomes. To make a meaningful impact, a relaxation is required in existing data sharing barriers. Health, housing, police, benefits teams and NISRA should all be working more effectively to share data to allow services to be focused on those in greatest need. Data zone and single output zone information does not provide the information required to target services at specific individuals and families. An example of this is the economically inactive. In Lisburn Castlereagh, 14% of the working age are economically inactive. That's approximately 14,000 people. Of that figure, there are almost 8% more women economically inactive than men. Through our labour market partnership, we have developed skills courses aimed at bringing more women into the workforce. Meanwhile, some local businesses have reflected on contract hours of employment to recognise child and care commitments. Without data to identify those individuals to allow for a more targeted approach, such initiatives must be advertised universally and hope that those in greatest need apply. Finally, the macro environment can impact on the best efforts of government. As can be seen this week, the executive has no control over rising fuel and energy costs from global considerations. Therefore, targets focused on bringing a set number of people out of poverty through energy efficiency measures, for example, are set up to fail due to those external pressures. In summary, I welcome the direction and cross-departmental approach taken to developing the anti-poverty strategy. I would ask that a more cohesive approach be adopted in taking forward the plan jointly between the executive departments, councils and community planning partnerships. Clear objectives for the community planning partnerships, simplified reporting and better use of data are essential if we wish to achieve lasting impact for those in greatest need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and that was very useful, and it's interesting to hear the different perspectives but also the synergies across them, and I have to say that's a very important point you finished on, the elephant in the room this morning being another conflict, another spike in prices with people already so hard pressed, huge spike in obviously oil for home heating, and that will affect probably some of the councils greater than others, and the potential increase in food inflation, which is really hurting families extremely at this time. So that's an interesting and a worrying context within which we're operating. So I'm going to be as brief as possible. If I could ask, maybe suggest that on any of the questions, if one person leads on that question, and then if people want to contribute or challenge or just have a different perspective on an answer or contribute something additional, but rather than going to everybody for every question, if we could get people to lead on the questions, and we'll take it that way. So I suppose first of all, were you disappointed that the strategy doesn't mention the pivotal role that local councils play in tackling poverty, nor give any clue to the role they would play in the implementation? Do you think you could be more centrally involved in the strategy as per the draft that was released?
Me to take this.
Patricia, yeah.
I obviously mentioned in my verbal submission an awful lot about the fact that we don't really have clarity around our role, and so I think the strategy, I can't even remember whether it mentioned us anywhere in it, but it really was, it didn't provide us any clarity as to what it is that we need to do. So I think, yes, we were disappointed that it didn't specifically mention either councils or community planning partnerships, because obviously they're our key way of trying to I suppose get that sort of synergy and local cohesion at a local level.
Okay, thank you. And the other one for me then was in relation, I think it was mentioned by everyone, but I know in particular 2 or 3 of you focus on, and the committee has itself been keen to focus on that issue around targets. How essential do you see as targets being in terms of the finalised strategy to make a difference.
There you go. Yeah. I think it's absolutely essential. I think that joined up piece of work that I saw where the departments are coming together with councils and community planning partnerships are absolutely fundamental to the direction of travel of this. I think we do have to just be careful that there will be different challenges for rural areas to inner urban areas, and therefore those targets, I think, need to be focused on outcomes. It's about making a difference. What's the actual difference on the ground for people? And then it's for community planning partnerships with their local community groups to consider how best they can help to achieve those overall outcomes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going then to members. I'm going to Pam, then Sean, then Kelly, then Morris. Go ahead, Pam.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for your attendance today. Very important subject, and we know through our own work as MLAs on the ground, the good work that councils do, and we do very much rely on that local base to basically carry out the work that initially starts here in this place. I suppose in terms of ensuring that people are armed and equipped with good mechanisms to lift themselves out of poverty, I suppose one of the couple of main factors I think in there is housing, having a good roof over your head, and employment. And when I say employment, I don't mean just any job. I mean good jobs, quality jobs that are well paid, because it does take an awful lot of money now to live and get by these days. We know the costs continue to rise and those challenges continue to exist. I suppose what do you see in terms of how do we not duplicate the work that's done regionally, locally? That would be the first point. And also, what gaps do you see, or what further do you need in terms of resources or flexibilities to address skills gaps in particular, and to support residents into good quality, high, stable employment?
Go ahead.
Happy to lead out on the first point, just in terms of the planning and the housing issue. In terms of that, I think the community planning partnership, I think all my colleagues had mentioned that in terms of the importance of that, and I think that's the vehicle that this should be driven through, because if we go down just engaging from an assembly to councils locally, then we don't have that collective opportunity where we engage the housing executive and other. We obviously have responsibility for planning within councils as well, so I think that whole approach in the community planning partnerships are set up to enable them conversations in terms of the skills gaps and enhancing them. It's the ongoing work I think we've all touched on. Again, labour market partnerships is successful, but it's in its infancy. To address poverty, it's going to be a slow burner in terms of skill education academies, where we're going with that, and that comes from the ground up. Each of the council will be individually different, but there's also synergies. I think the chair touched on that as well in terms of what we're trying to do. So I think it's going to be long-term investment, and again, going back to the data, it isn't going to change overnight. While we get skills, it's working with the business community and making sure that them opportunities exist, and listening to the business community as well, and opportunities. I mean, you'll be aware, member, of the investment that's happening locally within Newtownabbey Borough and the opportunities that are coming down the line there. So we need to be skills ready in terms of the pipeline of talent that we're then skilling them up for them job opportunities that are coming down the line, and that takes investment at an early stage to be ready for that when the job opportunities do come along. So it's working in partnership, economic development, housing, planning committees, and that collective approach I think is best driven, and I think we've demonstrated that today through community planning partnerships.
Sure, I just build on that just quickly. Is definitely, I think that skills piece is so important, and the labour market partnerships has a critical role. But I'm strong, and we all local government, you need to make sure you're reaching and you're proactively trying to reach the hard to reach. So we have a big agenda around inclusive growth, and there's specific cohorts that we know that are really challenging to get them back into the basic entry applause. So local, again, it's about that local intelligence, that local knowledge, that local partnership, to being able to mobilise basic community type pathways into opportunities. The other thing is within Belfast, like many of the councils, we're actively working with our business community and really challenging businesses, but in a sensitive way, because we realise the pressures with all businesses. So we have a thing called a good business charter, where we're trying to work to enable businesses not just to access opportunities such as procurement and all of that, but to raise their ambitions and their business practice around real living wage and zero-hour contracts. So there's a bit of that shared impact, shared benefits, so that, and I know a lot of the councils, not just Belfast, are actively doing that at the minute.
And that gaps piece then, briefly, if somebody could address the gaps that Pam asked about.
In terms of the gaps, each organisation doesn't know what they don't know, and that's part of the challenge. So the housing executive will know which houses needs modernised. The health service will know who their clients in social isolation are. The citizens' advice will know the people that are coming to them with particular poverty issues. But at the moment, because of what Patricia was saying about that lack of leadership from the centre, we're kind of lacking that sort of joined up piece locally to say how do we most focus our interventions to make an impact here. And I feel community planning partnerships have that opportunity if there was a bit of direction and perhaps maybe an element of funding to allow that piece of work to be progressed through research and coordination.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have to move on then. We have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Marisa and Mark also in, so I'll ask members to be really brief. Bear in mind we have 3 panels to get through. Shan, please.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you all so much. I've long been a believer that it is local government will be the on-the-ground delivery for a lot of the work that will go into the anti-poverty strategy to make it most efficient. Some of the things that I'm hearing across all 4 are clarity needed, partnerships, data and targets. And I think that's been coherent across all 4. In terms of data, can you give an outline of, is there any sharing of data at the moment through community planning partnerships from those agencies? I think that you mentioned there, David. What does that look like at the minute? And the other thing then is around the community planning partnerships. Can we have a clear idea of what they look like? Who makes up your community planning partnership? And are there consistent approaches across each council area?
I'm happy to start. In terms of the data, ensuring data, probably right to say that every city is at probably different places, but the intent is there through community planning and all the partners coming together, because it's not just about that individual data, it's how that data layers on one another and you draw the insights from that data. So I know, speaking from a Belfast perspective, we're trying to work, and we've developed a data sharing agreement, which took us a long time to do across different departments, both central government departments, local partners and some of the service providers, just to enable us to share data. And we're putting data analytics support around that, because it's okay having the data, it's actually understand what the data is telling you. So, but I do think community planning does provide that platform in a holistic way. Now, the challenge is, I know from a Belfast perspective, we have good central government input into that, but I know it differs across the region, because again, there is a number of councils and a lot of the departments and the agencies are regional. So if we could unlock that and secure greater partnership working from particularly regional bodies and statutory departments would be great. In terms of the membership of community planning, there is a range of statutory partners which go from academia, housing executive, health partners, but also the importance of it is the community stakeholders. In Belfast we have a number of community organisations, and then what we have also is substructures where we mobilise if there's an issue, a specific issue. For instance, this cost of living network is a substructure under community planning where we're bringing everyone with a stake in this area that either provides services, have a lived experience, or can provide resources or insights into the area of data. We're bringing them together to start to understand our strategy for going forward and where we can focus our energy, resources, and importantly our interventions where we can. So it's fair to say that there's definitely a willingness to share and pull data together to inform decision making. I believe there is a good forum and network through community planning to enable that to happen, but I would encourage that the central government departments have a duty at the minute to pay regard to community planning, not to be part of. Now, many do, and I can't say for Belfast we do have the departments, the key departments and the key regional agencies at the table, but it's just...
Yeah, thank you. Kelly, go ahead please.
Thank you very much, folks. As a former Ards and Newtownabbey councillor, I appreciate the work that's done, and of course across all of the councils. One thing that's just come to me, Pam had talked about the gaps. That's one of the things that I'm very concerned about, is duplication of services, and not having a report or an indicator of what's happening everywhere is an issue. But You'd mentioned something earlier, so I'm not going to go over the gap part again, but you'd mentioned something earlier about councils are not defined as a statutory provider of anti-poverty services, and I'm just wondering, in order to deliver going forward, is there any regulation or other changes that would need to take effect to allow you to do this? I know that's a bit of a
it's a tough question, yes. Probably would be my answer. I think obviously all of us here are very supportive of that community planning mechanism. I think one of the weaknesses with community planning is, while it is a statutory function, it probably lacks teeth, for want of a better word, because while partners have to be involved, there's no sort of holding to account the level of involvement and what partners actually do. So I think there is something a little bit stronger that we would probably welcome, that actually gives, and again it goes back to that clarity piece, is it a legislative thing, is it something else? But I think there is something that is needed to really I suppose acknowledge who has the role to convene and to encourage, well, stronger than encourage others to actually actively participate.
I'm just worried because I'm aware that some councils have their community plan in place and are reviewing that, and there's others are still to get there. For instance, we know that PAC, there's a hold up there with some of you. I'm just concerned that if we talk about all of this community planning coming together, but not all councils are in the same place, how would that, is there anything that could be done to affect that, to support?
All councils do have a community plan. We all have published our first community plans, and I think most of us are actually reviewing them. There's the local development plans that obviously align but are separate, and I think they're still kind of
But I'm thinking about that because you talked about housing pressure, so the development plan will bring that in. I'm just thinking, is there anything that we can do as central government to support that process for you?
One of the experiences from other jurisdictions who brought community planning in some time ago is that originally it came in on the basis that it was a participatory type, and it didn't really have teeth, and then they moved quite quickly to formal agreements, shared outcome agreements between central and local government, which then gave you that direction, that leadership and that accountability. And I think that is something at the right time, is because I do believe that accountability in community planning is currently missing, and the League of Scotland has moved significantly on in terms of in that space.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Morris, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. Quite often local councils are the main delivery mechanism for local government here, and quite often undervalued, but I can assure you I value them very highly, being a former councillor. But you highlighted that some of the anti-poverty poverty delivery remains fragmented across different departments, etc., and there's no real coordinating mechanism in place at the minute. So given that you have highlighted sharing data, have you had any experience of GDPR holding back that sharing, and what anti-poverty policies do you think aligns with your community planning partnerships, and how can the executive help the councils financially roll out your plans on behalf of the executive?
I think there's commitment across the board to address poverty, and I think it was Patricia that said that all of us have a commitment to do it, but no department within either Stormont or councils has the statutory function of leading on poverty. So it's good that DFC have at least been targeted, identified as a sponsor department. Some of the challenge, if you were to make it in legislation that councils were responsible for it, the challenge comes back to the data again, because we don't have individual information on any of our residents. So I couldn't tell, if I walk down a street, as will you do, you could probably tell that you're in one of your areas that's got more poverty, but you couldn't tell what the actual cause of it was, or what the specific differences were between street A and street B. So therefore, until you actually get to the more granular level of knowing what the particular issues are in a street, it's very difficult to then target services specifically for that nature. So in terms of coming back to your question about where does it best sit, it's that collaboration between central and local government. with each of those departments that we've mentioned previously, be it education, whether it's DFE, DFC, the whole shebang, coming round the table in that sort of co-production model to really address some of these issues, taking on the local knowledge that we have from our communities.
Maybe just...
Yeah, go ahead, Morris.
You had I think it was Patricia has mentioned it, employment opportunities are a great driver for bringing poverty down. But we have, in the Assembly here, we have a regional imbalance, and they have a regional balance strategy to try and address that. However, there seems to be a shrinking of opportunity towards the two main cities. And do you, as councils, find that difficult to try and have investment in your area?
It's not my area of expertise, but I would say from conversations with my colleagues that yes. I mean, we obviously are very close to Belfast, so I think it's fair enough to say that we do have challenges in terms of attracting opportunities to our area. And I know the stats for our area have not particularly changed, but if you live in Ards and North Down and work outside of it, you take home more pay than if you live in Ards and North Down and you work in Ards and North Down. So there is a real issue with high quality jobs, because I think we've all alluded to the fact that actually just having a job these days isn't enough to not be in poverty, that there's an awful lot of people with, you know, both adults in a household working, and poverty is still a big issue for them.
Very briefly, yeah.
Just building on as being obviously here representing Belfast, is one of the challenges for Belfast is there is opportunities, but we need to attract our own residents, because 55% of the people travel into the city to take up the opportunities. So there is still, like all our towns and cities, there's significant concentrations of high levels of need within the city. So we do have that challenge of not retaining the job, but attracting and mobilising and connecting local people into the opportunity.
Sure, if I could just maybe come in very quickly.
Thank you, Morris.
Sure.
Melissa.
I don't know if
sorry, Melissa.
Just very quickly, I suppose the guys have touched on, but we've had a lot of success not about inward investment, and some of your members will be, you know, acutely aware of that, given it's in their constituency as well. Global Point, you know, has been a huge success for us and continues to grow, you know, for that inward investment. But I suppose the point that I made earlier in terms of that pipeline of opportunity and making sure that the residents are getting skilled up for what them opportunities look for down the line is critical. So there's a join up for me, and the whole government approach is obviously welcome, but it's making sure that that's not siloed in each individual department and we come together on the community plan.
And we're also deeply concerned about the cuts to the local growth fund and the impact that's having exactly on that imperative that you're describing there, and what Westminster are doing in relation to that. So thank you for that. Melissa.
Roger Overleg and John, you're all very welcome here today. And I hear too just that need for the integration of services maybe throughout all the different council areas and that as well. So I'll put my two questions into one in a sense, right? Do you feel that the strategy is adequately resourced, we'll say at present, or will councils be adequately resourced to deliver the outcomes? And the second question, in a sense, are councils really seen as strategic partners, or are they more or less seen just as someone who is there as a delivering agent?
Go ahead.
I'll leave the first part of it. The answer around, is the strategy adequately resourced to deliver the outcomes? I would say I don't know, because the outcomes haven't been defined. I do think there is a costed action plan that is needed, and in terms of, there is a bit of clarification around the leadership and ownership of that action plan, including the role of councils and the role of local partners in delivering that. And I do, like all our councils, we are keen to work with the department, with the executive, to work through the practicalities of what that looks like, to make sure that we can effectively use our collective resources for greatest impact.
And maybe for your second point there, just about strategic versus delivery, we are strategic. We work closely with government for these sorts of issues. As I said in my opening piece, there's probably a need to involve us at an earlier stage to make sure that the strategy is both bottom up as well as top down. But the council's not going to be the only delivery partner. We are probably the glue of a community. We are the part that brings together all of your community planning partners to make sure things are delivered locally. So it's a coordination role as much as anything, because others might be better placed to do things.
Yeah, I go David and Kevin's response there as well. In terms of Antrim Newtownabbey locally, we have embedded our own anti-poverty strategy, and the key function of that in the initial stages was a mapping exercise, and I think it's critical that the central government looks at that mapping exercises about what is being currently invested. So it's not about new money all the time, it's about what is being invested in, and maybe that's rebranded as such, in terms of it's maybe just not an individual department. This is all done for the good of under anti-poverty or whatever the brand is of that, because there's already significant investment going into economic development, community development, etc., which has been well versed here. It's how we coordinate that approach and then see where the gaps are and see where that additional investment is required, and we've done that locally at Antrim Newtownabbey.
Thank you. And Mark then online. Mark, go ahead please.
Good I heard that, and welcome everyone here today. I think it's bizarre, and the point has been made that councils were kind of conspicuous by their absence in the draft anti-poverty strategy. Local government or councils are more than partners in tackling poverty. I think from what we've heard today and what some of us will have seen or known about in our own council areas, you're leaders in the battle against poverty as well. With regards to the community planning partnerships, I remember at the time of the local government reform bill, there was real pushback from departments and ministers at the time, and that's how it went through, as departments had to pay due regard. Just unfortunately, an earlier carnation of the bill was much stronger and put much more of an onus on departments actually paying and buying. And I was just wondering, in terms of the consultation on the draft anti-poverty strategy, have councils, I suppose, responded strongly to that on an individual basis and a collective one as well?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, we've all responded individually to the anti-poverty strategy. I'm not sure if a collect. Yeah,
Nilga.
Did Nilga?
Nilga has submitted a response also from the elected members' perspective of local government.
Yeah, well, hopefully that will see your inclusion, because we've seen from the minister before, he's happy enough to push responsibility for many things on the councils. So your omission from this was bizarre, but you'll take the responsibility, that's for sure. You've shown you'll take responsibility, but I suppose from your perspective, it's imperative that you're adequately resourced to do so as well.
Okay, listen, thank you very much. That's been really useful, really helpful, a great start, and we look forward to continuing this engagement, because I think it's clear we see yourselves as central, given your feet on the ground, your local knowledge, all of that. So thank you to our first panel. That is Ronan, Patricia, Kevin and David. Thank you very much. Okay, members, so we need to take a short break then. If I can just say, members, I propose we'll take follow-up actions after all three panels rather than individually. So if members take a note of any actions like that, we'll have to take a short break in broadcasting to get the panel in, I think. So we'll ask the clerk to do members' agreement.
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound.